As word of Samantha's legal battle against the HOA president spread through the neighborhood, her neighbors began to take notice. Many of them had their own stories of Mrs. Henderson's abuse of power, and they were more than ready to lend their support. One by one, Samantha's neighbors started to come forward, sharing their experiences and offering to testify on her behalf. The groundswell of community support buoyed Samantha's spirits, and she knew that she had the momentum she needed to take on the powerful HOA president. Samantha's legal team, a group of tenacious and experienced attorneys, quickly got to work, poring over the evidence and building a solid case. They knew that they were up against a formidable opponent, but they were more than ready to take on the challenge. As the investigation into Mrs. Henderson's actions began, the HOA president's allies within the community started to rally. They launched a smear campaign, painting Samantha as a troublemaker and questioning the credibility of her evidence. But Samantha refused to be cowed. She stood firm, surrounded by her growing band of supporters, and continued to push forward with her case. She knew that the truth was on her side, and she was determined to expose Mrs. Henderson's corruption for all to see. The tension in the community was palpable as the legal battle intensified. Neighbors who had once been too afraid to speak out against the HOA president now found their voices, emboldened by Samantha's courage and unwavering commitment to justice. As the case progressed, Samantha's legal team began to uncover a web of corruption and mismanagement within the HOA. They found evidence of financial irregularities, questionable contracts, and a pattern of intimidation tactics used against residents who dared to challenge Mrs. Henderson's authority. With each new revelation, the community's outrage grew. People who had once been passively accepting of the HOA's rule now saw it for what it was: a corrupt system designed to serve the interests of a few at the expense of the many. Samantha knew that the tide was turning in her favor, but she also knew that the fight was far from over. Mrs. Henderson was a formidable opponent, and she would stop at nothing to protect her power and influence within the community. As the battle lines were drawn, Samantha steeled herself for the challenges that lay ahead. She knew that she was up against a well-entrenched system, but she was more determined than ever to bring about real change in her neighborhood. With the support of her neighbors and the strength of the evidence she had gathered, Samantha was ready to take on the HOA president in a fight that would shake the foundations of her community to its core. Samantha's knuckles turned white as she gripped the steering wheel, her heart pounding in her chest. As she pulled up to the HOA office, she steeled herself for the confrontation that lay ahead. She burst through the doors, eyes scanning the room until they landed on Mrs. Henderson, who was seated behind the reception desk, a smug expression on her face. "Mrs. Henderson, we need to talk," Samantha said, her voice quivering with barely contained anger. The older woman looked up, feigning innocence. "Why, Samantha? What seems to be the problem?" "Don't play dumb with me," Samantha snapped, slamming her hand on the desk. "I have proof that you vandalized my car." Mrs. Henderson's eyes widened, a flicker of panic crossing her features. "I have no idea what you're talking about. I told you, I have video evidence that you—" "Save it," Samantha interrupted, pulling out her phone and thrusting it in the woman's face. "I have footage of you slashing my tires. You're going to pay for the damages, and you're going to apologize." The HOA president's face contorted with rage as she watched the incriminating video. She opened and closed her mouth several times, searching for a response, but Samantha refused to back down. "This is an outrage." Mrs. Henderson finally spat. "You can't just waltz in here and make accusations without any real proof." "The proof is right here," Samantha said, her voice trembling with emotion. "You're the one who's been abusing your power, and I'm not going to let you get away with it anymore." The two women glared at each other, the tension in the room palpable. Samantha could feel the adrenaline coursing through her veins, fueling her determination to stand up to the HOA bully. Suddenly, Mrs. Henderson's expression shifted, a conniving smile spreading across her face. "Well, Samantha, it seems we have a bit of a standoff on our hands. But I have to say, I'm quite impressed by your little hidden camera trick. Samantha's heart sank as the older woman's words registered. What are you talking about? Oh, don't play innocent with me, dear, Mrs. Henderson purred. You think I don't know about your little surveillance system? I've been keeping a close eye on you ever since that last incident. Samantha's blood ran cold. Mrs. Henderson had known about the dash cam all along, and she had still gone ahead with her scheme. The realization that the HOA president had intentionally implicated her in a crime she didn't commit sent a wave of fury through Samantha. You're going to regret this, Mrs. Henderson, she growled, her eyes narrowing dangerously. The older woman let out a cruel laugh. We'll see about that, Samantha. I'm the one with the power here, and I'm not about to let you or your little camera ruin everything. The gauntlet had been thrown, and Samantha knew that the stakes had just been raised. This was no longer just about her tires. It was a battle for control, a fight for justice against a corrupt authority figure who would stop at nothing to protect her own interests. Samantha took a deep breath, steeling herself for the challenge ahead. She was done being a victim, and she was determined to bring Mrs. Henderson down, no matter the cost. Samantha stormed out of the HOA office, her mind racing with the implications of Mrs. Henderson's startling revelation. The older woman had known about the dash cam all along, and she had still gone ahead with her scheme to frame Samantha. As Samantha replayed the confrontation in her head, a wave of determination swept over her. She wasn't going to let Mrs. Henderson's abuse of power go unchecked. This was a fight she was determined to win, no matter the cost. Jumping into her car, Samantha quickly pulled up the video footage on her phone, her fingers trembling with urgency. She needed to make copies to ensure that the evidence was safely stored and ready to be used against the HOA president. Once the files were secured, Samantha began formulating a plan of attack. She knew that Mrs. Henderson wouldn't back down without a fight, and she needed to be prepared for the onslaught of legal threats and intimidation tactics that were sure to come. Reaching for her laptop, Samantha began researching local laws and regulations surrounding HOA practices. She needed to understand her rights, to arm herself with the knowledge to stand up to Mrs. Henderson's bullying tactics. As she delved into the complex world of homeowners associations, Samantha's eyes widened in horror. The more she learned, the more she realized how much power HOA presidents like Mrs. Henderson wielded, and how easily they could abuse that power to target and harass residents. Anger burned in the pit of Samantha's stomach. She couldn't believe that her own neighborhood had fallen victim to this kind of corrupt leadership. But she was determined to put an end to it, no matter what it took. Steeling herself, Samantha began reaching out to her neighbors, sharing the incriminating video and encouraging them to speak up against Mrs. Henderson's abuses. She knew that strength in numbers would be key in taking down the HOA president, and she was determined to rally the community to her cause. As the word began to spread, Samantha could feel the tide slowly turning. Neighbors who had once been too afraid to stand up to Mrs. Henderson's bullying tactics were now coming forward, sharing their own stories of intimidation and harassment. Samantha's heart swelled with pride as she watched her community come together, united in their determination to hold the HOA president accountable. She knew that the fight ahead would be a long and arduous one, but she was more than ready to take it on. With the evidence in hand and the support of her neighbors, Samantha felt a newfound sense of confidence. Mrs. Henderson may have the power of the HOA behind her, but Samantha had something even more powerful, the will of the people. As she prepared to take her case to the authorities, Samantha couldn't help but feel a twinge of excitement. This was her chance to not only clear her name, but to bring about real change in her community, and she was more than ready to rise to the challenge. Samantha took a deep breath as she made her way to the local police station, the video evidence safely tucked away in her bag. She knew that the road ahead would be long and arduous, but she was determined to see this through to the end. As she approached the front desk, the officer on duty eyed her with a mix of curiosity and skepticism. "How can I help you today, ma'am?" "I need to file a report," Samantha said, her voice steady and resolute. "I have video evidence of the HOA president vandalizing my car." The officer's eyebrows shot up in surprise. "The HOA president? That's a pretty serious accusation." Samantha nodded, pulling out her phone and quickly showing the officer the incriminating footage. "I assure you, it's all true. Mrs. Henderson slashed my tires, and she's been threatening me ever since." The officer's expression grew thoughtful as he watched the video, his brow furrowed in concentration. After a few moments, he looked up at Samantha, a grim expression on his face. "This is a serious matter. I'll need to take your statement and get a copy of this video as evidence." He paused, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Are you sure you want to go through with this? Mrs. Henderson is a powerful figure in the community, and she may not take kindly to being accused of a crime." Samantha felt a surge of determination coursing through her veins. "I'm sure. I won't let her abuse her power and get away with this. I've already reached out to my neighbors, and they're willing to come forward and support my case." The officer nodded, a hint of admiration in his eyes. "All right then, let's get this process started." Over the next several hours, Samantha meticulously recounted the events leading up to the confrontation at the HOA office, providing the officer with every detail she could remember. She knew that the case would be an uphill battle, but she was determined to see it through. As she left the police station, Samantha couldn't help but feel a sense of trepidation. Mrs. Henderson was not going to take this lying down, and she knew that the HOA president would be pulling out all the stops to discredit her and bury the case. But Samantha also felt a surge of hope. With the support of her neighbors and the evidence she had gathered, she knew that she had a fighting chance. And she was more than ready to take on the HOA president in a legal battle that would shake the very foundations of her community. As she drove home, Samantha's mind raced with the next steps. She knew that she would need to assemble a team of legal experts to help her navigate the complex world of HOA regulations and property laws. And she was determined to leave no stone unturned in her quest for justice. The stage was set for a showdown, and Samantha was more than ready to take on the challenge. Mrs. Henderson may have thought she had the upper hand, but Samantha was about to prove her wrong in a big way. As word of Samantha's legal battle against the HOA president spread through the neighborhood, her neighbors began to take notice. Many of them had their own stories of Mrs. Henderson's abuse of power, and they were more than ready to lend their support. One by one, Samantha's neighbors started to come forward, sharing their experiences and offering to testify on her behalf. The groundswell of community support buoyed Samantha's spirits, and she knew that she had the momentum she needed to take on the powerful HOA president. Samantha's legal team, a group of tenacious and experienced attorneys, quickly got to work, poring over the evidence and building a solid case. They knew that they were up against a formidable opponent, but they were more than ready to take on the challenge. As the investigation into Mrs. Henderson's actions began, the HOA president's allies within the community started to rally. They launched a smear campaign, painting Samantha as a troublemaker and questioning the credibility of her evidence. But Samantha refused to be cowed. She stood firm, surrounded by her growing band of supporters, and continued to push forward with her case. She knew that the truth was on her side, and she was determined to expose Mrs. Henderson's corruption for all to see. The tension in the community was palpable as the legal battle intensified. Neighbors who had once been too afraid to speak out against the HOA president now found their voices, emboldened by Samantha's courage and unwavering commitment to justice. As the case progressed, Samantha's legal team began to uncover a web of corruption and mismanagement within the HOA. They found evidence of financial irregularities, questionable contracts, and a pattern of intimidation tactics used against residents who dared to challenge Mrs. Henderson's authority. With each new revelation, the community's outrage grew. People who had once been passively accepting of the HOA's rule now saw it for what it was: a corrupt system designed to serve the interests of a few at the expense of the many. Samantha knew that the tide was turning in her favor, But she also knew that the fight was far from over. Mrs. Henderson was a formidable opponent, and she would stop at nothing to protect her power and influence within the community. As the battle lines were drawn, Samantha steeled herself for the challenges that lay ahead. She knew that she was up against a well-entrenched system, but she was more determined than ever to bring about real change in her neighborhood. With the support of her neighbors and the strength of the evidence she had gathered, Samantha was ready to take on the HOA president in a fight that would shake the foundations of her community to its core. As the legal battle between Samantha and the HOA president raged on, the community's outrage continued to grow. More and more residents came forward, sharing their own stories of Mrs. Henderson's abuses and demanding accountability. Samantha's legal team worked tirelessly, uncovering a web of corruption and mismanagement within the HOA that extended far beyond the vandalism of her car. They discovered evidence of financial irregularities, questionable contracts, and a pattern of intimidation tactics used against residents who dared to challenge the HOA president's authority. One by one, Samantha's neighbors took the stand, their testimonies painting a damning picture of Mrs. Henderson's reign of terror. The courtroom echoed with tales of harassment, coercion, and the systematic suppression of dissent within the community. Faced with the overwhelming evidence and the growing public outcry, Mrs. Henderson's allies within the HOA began to waver. The once unified front started to crumble as cracks began to show in the foundation of the president's power. Sensing the shift in the tide, Samantha's legal team seized the opportunity, pressing their advantage and digging ever deeper into the HOA's operations. They uncovered a complex web of shell companies and offshore accounts, all linked back to Mrs. Henderson and her inner circle. As the investigation progressed, the magnitude of the corruption became increasingly clear. It was no longer just about the vandalism of Samantha's car. It was about the systematic abuse of power, the exploitation of vulnerable residents, and the complete disregard for the well-being of the community. The courtroom became a battleground, with Mrs. Henderson and her team of high-powered attorneys fighting tooth and nail to defend their crumbling empire. But Samantha and her allies were relentless, determined to expose the truth and bring about real change. The pressure mounted, and the noose began to tighten around Mrs. Henderson's neck. As the trial wore on, the once confident HOA president began to show signs of strain, her composure slipping as the weight of the evidence against her became too much to bear. Samantha watched with a mixture of satisfaction and relief as the tide turned in her favor. She knew that the road ahead would still be long and arduous, but the realization that she was on the verge of victory fueled her determination to see this through to the end. As the final arguments drew to a close, Samantha felt a sense of anticipation and trepidation. The fate of her community hung in the balance, and she knew that the judge's decision would have far-reaching consequences. But with the unwavering support of her neighbors and the strength of the evidence she had amassed, Samantha was confident that justice would prevail. The HOA president's reign of terror was about to come to a crashing end, and she was ready to embrace the changes that would follow. The courtroom was tense as the judge took the bench, his expression solemn. Samantha sat on the edge of her seat, her heart pounding in her chest. This was the moment she had been waiting for, the culmination of months of hard-fought legal battles. As the judge cleared his throat, the room fell silent. In the matter of the case against Mrs. Henderson, the HOA president, I have carefully reviewed the evidence presented by both sides. It is my conclusion that the defendant, Mrs. Henderson, is guilty of vandalism, abuse of power, and financial mismanagement within the homeowners association. A collective gasp rippled through the courtroom as the judge's words sank in. Samantha felt a surge of relief and vindication, her eyes stinging with tears of joy. After all the obstacles she had faced, the truth had finally come to light. The judge continued, his voice firm. The defendant's actions have caused significant harm to the residents of this community, both financially and emotionally. As such, I am ordering the immediate removal of Mrs. Henderson from her position as HOA president and the dissolution of the current Homeowners Association Board. Mrs. Henderson's face contorted with rage, and she leaped to her feet, her lawyers scrambling to try and stop the judge. But Samantha's legal team stood tall, unwavering in their pursuit of justice. Furthermore, the judge said, raising his hand to silence the commotion, "I am ordering a full forensic audit of the HOA's financial records and the establishment of a new independent board to be elected by the residents of this community." The courtroom erupted in applause, and Samantha felt a weight lift from her shoulders. She had done it. She had taken down the corrupt HOA president and reclaimed the power for the people. As Mrs. Henderson was escorted from the courtroom, Samantha turned to her neighbors, who had been by her side throughout this ordeal. Tears of joy streamed down their faces, and they embraced her, their relief and gratitude palpable. Samantha knew that this was just the beginning. The road ahead would be long and arduous as the community worked to rebuild the trust and stability that had been shattered by Mrs. Henderson's reign of terror. But she was ready to take on the challenge, fueled by the knowledge that her actions had made a real difference. As she left the courthouse, Samantha felt a sense of pride and purpose. She had stood up to the abuse of power, and she had won. The HOA president's days of unchecked authority were over, and a new era of transparency and accountability was about to begin. In the aftermath of the trial, the community of Samantha's neighborhood was in a state of upheaval. The dissolution of the corrupt HOA board had left a void, and the residents were eager to take back control of their community. Samantha quickly emerged as a natural leader, rallying her neighbors and guiding them through the process of electing a new independent HOA board. She knew that this was a critical moment, a chance to rebuild the trust and stability that had been shattered by Mrs. Henderson's misdeeds. The election was hotly contested, with a diverse group of candidates vying for the chance to steer the community in a new direction. Samantha worked tirelessly, campaigning and mobilizing her neighbors to ensure that the right people were chosen to lead the HOA. As the votes were tallied, Samantha watched with bated breath. When the results were announced, she couldn't help but feel a swell of pride. The new board was comprised of a passionate and dedicated group of residents, each committed to restoring the community's values and ensuring that the abuses of the past would never be repeated. With the new HOA leadership in place, Samantha and her neighbors set to work, tackling the many challenges that lay ahead. They pored over the forensic audit, uncovering the extent of the financial mismanagement and working to recover the funds that had been siphoned off by Mrs. Henderson and her cronies. As the community came together to address these issues, Samantha couldn't help but marvel at the transformation that was taking place. Gone was the atmosphere of fear and mistrust, replaced by a renewed sense of unity and purpose. Slowly but surely, the neighborhood began to heal. The residents took pride in their community, working together to address long-standing problems and implement new policies that prioritize transparency, accountability, and the well-being of all. Samantha found herself at the heart of this transformation, her voice and her leadership guiding the way. She had proven that one person could make a difference, that standing up to abuse of power and corruption could lead to real, lasting change. As the dust settled, Samantha looked around at her transformed neighborhood, a smile playing on her lips. The HOA president's reign of terror was over, and a new era of prosperity and community had begun. In the end, Samantha's story was not just about the vindication of one individual, but about the power of community to come together and reclaim its rightful place. It was a testament to the strength of the human spirit, and a reminder that when people stand up for what is right, they can achieve remarkable things.